Welcome everybody to the Travel Massive Live Southeast Asian Quarantine Panel. I am coming to you live from the official Travel Massive studio here in Bangkok, also known as my bedroom. I am again going to ask everyone to leave their profile on mute with their video off. This is going to improve the quality of the program tonight. I want to introduce myself. I am the moderator, Rick Gazarian. I'm the Bangkok chapter leader here, as well as the Asia coordinator for Travel Massive. And there we go. And I am very excited about our panel tonight. As you know, we have three representatives from the travel industry. We have Mar Pages, Bertie Lawson, and Jens Teinhardt. Our panel representatives, they represent three different areas of Southeast Asia, as well as three different industries, and they will introduce themselves in a moment. Before we jump into the panel discussion, I want to provide you with some updates in regard to Travel Massive. One, why you should be updating your Travel Massive profile. This one might surprise you for a moment. And two, at Travel Massive, we have a vibrant community of over 60,000 members. Travel Massive has a new way of highlighting some of our members. We also have a Travel Massive podcast. A lot of us are looking for new content during this time of quarantine. There's only so many times you can watch The Tiger King. And finally, we have some housekeeping issues that we will take a look at. So let's take a look at why you should be updating your profile. You might be surprised how well Travel Massive ranks on Google, meaning your Travel Massive profile might be the highest ranking link when you search for your name. And many times it's going to rank higher than your LinkedIn profile. I have two examples with our panelists. Look at Mar Pages, some beautiful pictures. But you're going to notice the first link is Travel Massive. It actually beats out LinkedIn in her own blog. You want to make sure the information is up to date on your profile, because that's the first thing that someone might be looking at. And our other panelist, Bertie from Yangon, same thing. You type in his name, Travel Massive is coming up first. Make sure your profile is updated. And we have some great lists, a list that just came out that you can find on the Travel Massive website, 100 inspiring women travel founders within the Travel Massive community. This just came out a couple of days ago and has close to 5,000 views. And another great list for 2020, 50 travel startups to watch in 2020. And a third list I want to touch on, 30 travel podcasts that you should be listening to. These are podcasters from the Travel Massive community, including some Southeast Asian favorites. We've got Scott Coates and Trevor Rages, who have the Talk Travel Asia podcast, and another well-known podcaster, Greg Jorgensen, who has the Bangkok podcast. So check out this great list that we've curated for you. And speaking of podcast, you should be updating your podcast player, because Travel Massive has their own podcast where they speak to Travel Massive leaders in the community. So please subscribe today wherever you listen. We're going to housekeeping. I've said this a number of times. Please leave the profile on mute and video off. If you have any questions at any time, put them in the chat box. And at the end of the panel, we'll be taking questions from you. Also note, we'll be recording the presentation. Feel free to share any feedback with us after the presentation. And make sure on travelmassive.com that you've signed up for Travel Massive Live. These are where we're going to be broadcasting all of the information in regard to Travel Massive. And with that, I would like to take a moment and introduce the panel. Panel, thank you for joining me today. I'm hoping you can take a moment and say hi. Mar Pages, we'll start off with you. Please introduce yourself.
Hello, everyone. My name is Mar. I'm from Barcelona. I live in Singapore. I am a luxury travel blogger. I started my blog over 6 years ago. And I have been blogging full-time for 2 years. Before that, I was working at Google. I had a global role at Google. And prior to that, I was a management consultant. So I've been traveling and living abroad for 15 years now, away from Spain, and in Singapore for 9.
Excellent. Welcome, Mar. And Bertie, can you check in from Yangon and say hi and introduce yourself?
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Yeah, my name's Bertie. I'm from the UK. I'm the managing director of Sampan Travel, which is a boutique tour operator based here in Yangon, creating tailor-made tours through Myanmar. We've been operating for about 6 years. I've been leading it for about 5 years. We are a boutique agency, but we also take sustainability very seriously. We were the third operator to achieve Travel Life certification in Myanmar. And as much as possible, we try and avoid the more stale, tried and tested routes through the country that have often been the way, and try and create some more innovative, exciting itineraries for those people visiting Myanmar.
Awesome. Thanks, Bertie. Thank you for joining us. Jens, why don't you introduce yourself, and I have to give you the award for best backdrop on the wall. But Jens, welcome.
Thank you, Rick. And I'm wearing my Songkran shirt just for you and for Peter and other ones. So dressed for the occasion. But yeah, my name is Jens Trainhardt. I'm a German-Canadian living in Bangkok. I'm the executive director for the Mekong Tourism Coordinating Office, which is the secretariat of the 6 member countries of the Greater Mekong sub-region. So Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar, Thailand, Vietnam, and Yunnan and Guangxi in China. So we basically work for the 6 governments. We're owned by the 6 governments to drive responsible tourism and inclusive growth. Various initiatives, which I guess we'll talk about later. Prior to that, I lived in Beijing. I co-founded a company called Dragon Trail Interactive in Beijing, which helps companies to market to Chinese consumers. And prior to that, I was head of marketing strategy for the Canadian Tourism Commission based in Vancouver. And prior to that, head of e-commerce for Fairmont Hotels and Resorts. I'm also founder of Chameleon Strategies, which is a strategy consulting company and technology company based in Bangkok and Hong Kong. And currently we're also on the board of the UNWTO affiliate members and serving as vice chair of the board. So that's maybe as a quick introduction. Thank you.
Quick, you're wearing a lot of different hats, Jens. So I'm looking forward to getting multiple different perspectives on what's happening in the region. Before we jump in that, since we have 3 representatives from Singapore, Yangon, and Bangkok, I want to just get a 30,000 foot or 10,000 meter overview of how your country or city is being affected by COVID. In other words, what's shut down, what isn't, what's open, what isn't. Mar, we'll start off with you. What's going on in Singapore? What is the government doing? And what is your perception or take on how COVID is affecting the people, the economy?
Well, as you know, like in other parts in Asia, in Singapore, the situation started already at the end of January. So ever since I came back from Europe mid-January, we have been suffering, I guess, to a degree, higher or lower degree, the effects of the virus. At the beginning, the government was very much ahead of the situation, very prepared. Since 2018, they approved a plan from SARS, from the last time that the virus hit the country, which was very badly hit. And so they were extremely well prepared. They deployed everything and they've been tracking everything since day one. So they've been doing very heavy contact tracing. Unfortunately, while the situation was under control until maybe 2 weeks ago, very much under control, less than 500 cases, very, very low cases after 2 months. Unfortunately, with all the returnees, when the situation hit Europe, all the Singaporeans and foreigners, residents returned to Singapore, and then the numbers of imported cases started to soar quite significantly. So today we have more than 2,000, I think almost 2,500. So in 2 weeks, we had 2,000 cases, more than 2,000 cases. So the situation became quite untenable. And then on top of that, the infection rates started to increase a lot in the foreign worker dormitories, which really is what kind of exploded the number of patients in Singapore. And thus the government decided last week, well, 10 days ago, that they were going to impose a lockdown, which has been called a circuit breaker. So they have very heavily avoided using the word lockdown or similar. But since the 7th of April and for a month until the 4th of May, we are on lockdown, which means that you can only leave the house to go and do groceries, to go and exercise at a nearby park. And that's it. There's not to be any more relation between people that are from different households or any social gatherings of any sort. Businesses are closed. You can only ask for an exemption to go back to work. And even if you get an exemption from the government, if you're in essential service or if your business is in what they call global supply chains, let's say you're in logistics, which Singapore is a big hub for, you can ask for an exemption, and then you, a small amount of travelers from your company, a small amount of employees from your company can go to work. A small percentage of them, only 20%, and only for a few hours every day. Otherwise, everybody's to work from home and businesses are shut.
Excellent. Mark, quick question. You mentioned that you're not allowed to leave the house except take a walk in the park or go grocery shopping, for instance. Is there any way the Singapore government is monitoring those activities?
Not, I mean, Singapore is a very camera heavy country, right? So it's easy for the government to monitor if there are people gathering in places, and they do. So they've started issuing warnings. 4 days ago, they announced that they were going to give first warning and then a fine. As of 2 days ago, they go straight into the fine because the number of people violating the rules has been quite high. So they've been closing down parks, closing down beaches. I guess that it's a small country, right? So it's easy for the government to look at the cameras and see, okay, there are congregations in X park, and then send the police there to immediately disperse the crowds. So yeah, I would say they are controlling it in other ways, not so much individually. And there is an app that you can download to facilitate contact tracing, which basically is tracking where you are.
Excellent. And Bertie, I have to be honest, I'm hearing news all the time about Thailand. I'm living here. That makes sense. I see Singapore in the news. I'm not hearing a lot of updates what's going on Myanmar and Yangon. Give us an idea of how COVID is affecting the people and the economy as a whole there.
Yeah, so we're in day 4 of lockdown now. That is scheduled to last until the 19th. So for the entirety of the Tinjan Sokran holidays. There's talk that might be extended, but so far as I know, that hasn't been announced yet. I haven't been outside since lockdown has commenced, but it seems like it's being respected throughout the city and other cities as well. And even before lockdown, the number of cars and people on the streets was minimal compared to normal times. I think lockdown came quite late to Myanmar compared to other countries in the region. But our first confirmed case of COVID wasn't until about 3 weeks ago. And even now there's 41 cases, I think about 4 deaths. And so despite that huge border with China, confirmed cases have taken a while to be recognized in Myanmar. And I think that's largely been down to a lack of testing. That being said, I think even before those confirmed cases were here, there was a certain amount of skepticism about how bad it could get in Myanmar. There was a certain amount of belief that the strength of the Myanmar immune system for each person would keep the virus at bay, which I think has now been dampened slightly. Commercial flights were stopped, I think, beginning of this month until today. That's been extended now to the end of this month. And obviously, Tinjan, like in other countries in the region, is a major time for domestic travel, people returning home to their regions to be with their families for the holidays. That hasn't been curtailed, although there's a lot of restrictions. So in certain regions and states, there are restrictions about who can come back and what quarantine measures they will need to undergo if they're returning from, say, Yangon. And I know certain restrictions, such as the number of people on a bus or coach, have been implemented as well.
Okay, thank you, Bertie. Jens is our representative from Bangkok. Sabadi Be My Thai, and tell us what's going on in Thailand.
Well, Rick, I'll let you kind of fill in if I forget anything since you're on the ground. But I guess, I mean, with Thailand, there was maybe some confusion at the beginning, but I think Thailand now is quite organized. There is a lockdown now, so all the restaurants and bars are closed. So the delivery business are doing quite well. We also now have a curfew. I think that starts at 10 p.m. until the morning. I'm not too sure because I go to bed at around 10 o'clock, so it doesn't really affect me too much. But now also there's an alcohol ban, which I think upset quite a lot of people. But I think, again, it's the right decision, because sometimes when you do go out and even the bars are closed, you see, you know, people sitting on the street and just drinking there. So so I think that kind of mitigated that a little bit. International flights into Thailand are also stopped now. So basically the country is on lockdown. There have been more cases. We put up a resource page for all the 6 member countries on our website, mekongtourism.org. So that has all the details. So I don't want to repeat too much what's on there, but we are updating that regularly. Last actually just today. So that has become actually a quite valuable resource for people that are looking for information just on these member countries.
Okay,
but maybe
great.
Rick, you wanna add some stuff?
I think you did. I think you did a good job, Jens. Bertie, let's start off with you. You're the managing director of Sampan Travel in Yangon. If I understand correctly, you're talking about inbound tourism, tourists who are coming to discover Myanmar, the country. What's going on? How has COVID affected your business since this all started this year? What's been the effect?
Yeah, well, a lot, but I admit I was quite slow to realize the extent of the damage that it would do, or the change that it would bring. So, you know, in normal times, we're now going into low season. And in low season, most of our clients are expats living in Yangon, or potentially in the region in Bangkok, Singapore, who are coming to Myanmar or traveling around Myanmar with their young families, with their partners, for long weekends and public holidays. So at first I thought, well, if COVID's going to stop a lot of international long-haul travel, this could be good for my business, because more expats are going to use my services to go trekking around Myanmar rather than going to other countries. And in fact, at first I did see a big uptake in inquiries from people living in Yangon saying, hey, Bertie, I'm not going to Vietnam anymore because I'm not sure about the situation with COVID. What can you offer me and my family in Myanmar? So at first I thought this could be actually good for business. Quite quickly though, that changed. Foreigners from Europe and the hotspots of COVID began being led into forced quarantine upon arrival in Myanmar. And there are even reports of foreigners who are traveling around other parts of the country being sort of not allowed out of their hotels by local police forces, or even sort of threatened with forced quarantine, even if they weren't showing any symptoms. So that, you know, rang a few alarm bells for sure. And then when the British embassy here said, you know, right, all Brits should leave, that was pretty much the you know, end game for us. So we have obviously seen our inquiries dry up completely, and I expect that to be the case for a few months yet. So we had a lot of ships were postponed, some were cancelled, some were cut short, and we're certainly not dealing with any inquiries right now. So we're having to sort of shift everything we do for the next few months to sort of more sort of long-term goals as opposed to arranging itineraries.
And Bertie, when did you see inbound tourism dry up? So when did bookings really drive down to zero? What part of the year was that?
So it wouldn't have been until sort of mid-March. So up until then, like I say, we were still getting a lot of inquiries, again, mainly from expats in Yangon, the region. looking to travel this week, looking to travel for Xinjiang. We even quickly created a new webpage on Xinjiang holidays, 10-day Xinjiang holidays for expats who are not then going abroad or back home. And then it was really, I remember the day, but I remember it was that morning when the UK embassy here recommended Brits to leave. That was a lot of our clients, firstly. And a lot of the other European embassies, even they didn't follow suit in the exact same terms. Those conversations began being had amongst the expatriate community. And very quickly, those people were leaving. And then at that point, we actually realized, this isn't responsible for us to be even promoting travel around Myanmar, let alone whether we have any business out of it or not. So we then said, look, guys, stay home and we'll plan something for you later in the year, hopefully.
And Bertie, one more question. What's been the strategy for cancellations, deposit, refunds? What's Sampan's thoughts process in regards to customers?
So we have our terms and conditions, which I haven't really paid a lot of attention to in the past, but suddenly they became quite important. Most of our, because it was end of the season anyway, most of our trips were either so far in advance that deposits hadn't been paid yet, and nor had we made payments. Therefore, those trips could be postponed or just put on hold because no money had exchanged hands. The other ones were within the 30-day period, which gave us quite a lot of leeway in terms of what we were obliged to refund to our guests. In our policy, in the 30-day period, we're only obliged to pay back anything that we haven't ourselves paid out to suppliers that we can't retrieve from them. And actually, this is the first time I've experienced anything like this in terms of mass cancellations. And I've got to say, the hotels in Myanmar, I think, have been fantastic. And the vast majority of all our suppliers have given us almost full refunds and waived cancellation policies, which has allowed us in turn to give as much back to our clients as possible, which has been really good. So I'm very, very grateful to those hotels in Myanmar who have done that.
Great to see that they're collaborating. Mar, let's check in with you. You've been to over 100 countries. You've been a travel blogger for, I think, 10 years. You've been creating content on your blog. How has COVID affected content creators? What's the effect been on you?
I think that you know as well as me, Rick, that if you write about Asia, you are hit before anybody else. And that's my case, unfortunately. So even though my blog is global and I write about all destinations, I have a very strong focus on Asia, right? So countries like Japan, Korea, Singapore, Thailand are my top destinations in terms of content. So ever since January, I started to see a decline in traffic. Obviously, as the cases started to come through, people stopped traveling to those places. And so the number of people researching those destinations also dropped. So bookings dropped, traffic dropped, everything started to go down second half of January already, which is like a month well before it started to hit Europe. And so at the beginning, I didn't know what the extent of that would be, like everybody else. So what I did is I updated all of my content for those destinations to include useful resources for the specific countries on the coronavirus status and situation. So like I updated all of those articles, which probably negatively affected me because Google was negatively punishing sites that mentioned the virus at the beginning. So that, even though I thought it was very useful for my audience, and I'm sure it was, because unless, at the beginning, unless you lived in Singapore or in Korea, you didn't really know what the real local resources were, right? Of course, you can read the news, but, knowing that the Singapore government has like WhatsApp number that you can subscribe to, and every day they send updates of the cases, of the measures, of the laws, everything is really, really useful. And unless you live here, it's not that easy to find, right? So at the beginning, I updated all of these articles, 50 articles with useful resources, which, I don't know whether it negatively or not negatively affected me, but my guess is that it probably negatively affected me even more because Google later on expressed the fact, Google and others, that they were negatively, down ranking such content. So probably that was not a good idea. Then when the situation started to expand, I realized that writing about all of the content from Spain, which is another area of focus for me as a Spanish, and I had just returned from a month in Spain doing a campaign with the Catalan Tourism Board. Quickly trying to publish all the content because I thought, well, Europe will be later. That also didn't help me. And then I just, it just came to the conclusion that, okay, like this is like widely spread right now. So it doesn't matter. There is no destination that makes any sense to promote. So then I kind of like took a step back. I kind of settled down and I thought about other things to do, which I think we'll talk about later with other things we can do. But at the beginning, it just affected me very much. And me and every content creator, obviously people are not booking. So if you have a real focus on travel and you have a real focus on planning and booking, you are very negatively affected, up to 80-90% down in terms of traffic and bookings down to 0. And if you write about other things that are kind of evergreen or more like long-term inspirational posts, those are the articles that continue to get traffic. So I have quite a lot of destination content for the Maldives, and the Maldives tends to be a long-term planning for most people, honeymoon. So those articles still receive traffic. Articles more related to evergreen content, more like long-term inspirational ones, beaches in places, cuisines, these sort of things still get traffic, but anything that has to do with booking and traveling is definitely down to close to 0. And I'm not seeing any improve for the last month. It's pretty much flat since a month.
And Mark, sounds like you were the canary in the coal mine at one level, because you said you were detecting traffic declining in mid-January, but I also know you do a lot of affiliate sales as well. In other words, you promote hotels and you can earn an affiliate commission when people book a hotel through one of your links. Give us an idea of what type of revenue hit you took. So did that go down 50%, 95%? What's this been? How has this changed?
Like 100%.
Okay.
It's like everybody else, right? It's like if you're a tour company, you pretty much have no income, right? If you are a content creator, nobody is booking, right? So while people might still be reading, they are certainly not booking. So they might be reading about the potential trip in the future to the Maldives, but they're not booking it right now, right? So maybe not 100, but 90%, yes. And even the advertising revenue has taken a huge hit, right? So anything that has to do with, if you write in the content industry, my main income stream, like any publication, is advertising. And advertising is not only down because the traffic is down, but also the revenue that the advertisers are paying is significantly down, like up to 70 or 80%. So imagine if your traffic is down 80%, and on top of that, the money that you could be making on that traffic is 80% less, it's a compounded effect, right? So it is down to, it's 80% down my income, right? There are other things that are kind of like, if you do campaigns with brands, some of them might still work. There are some companies in the travel industry that still advertise and that are more resilient and that might be doing things that are, not so directly related to booking. I don't know, people that do online things and stuff like that, those might still be working. And those are the revenues that you still have. But I had bookings up until, like Bertie was saying, right? I kind of like up until mid-March, I still was seeing bookings for domestic travel, for the Americas as well. I have content on Mexico. Mexico was quite late to the game as well. So people were still booking trips in Mexico. And I am seeing a little bit, like a very tiny little bit of uptake in domestic travel in Korea. Korea, which is a very big market for me, #1 country or #2 country for me, because my content manager lives in Korea and is married to a Korean, that I've seen a little bit of uptake because Korea is not in lockdown. So the Koreans, the local expat living in Korea who read in English, might still do a little bit. So I see a little bit of that. And in Singapore, I was seeing a few bookings as well up until the lockdown of last week. So people might, the locals might still go to Gardens by the Bay and buy a ticket for something. So I was seeing a little bit of that, but now it's pretty much down to 0.
Okay, well, hopefully there'll be some better days in the near future. Jens, I'm excited to hear from you and get some of your insights. You are conferring with the tourism ministers and industry leaders of 6 countries within the Mekong region. I guess you might have to be a little politically sensitive here, but give me, what were you learning in January? What were their insights? Did they have any early warnings of how challenging and devastating this was going to be to the region?
I mean, the Singapore government, which was the one that I was getting the most information with, and then...
Actually, that one's for Jens.
Sorry.
No worries, no worries.
No, please go ahead. Go ahead. Talk about Singapore and then I follow you. Please go ahead.
No, here, I mean, the government was very trying to preempt and trying to be ahead, right? So they were like doing lots of things at the beginning to kind of like, talk to people, and like they were doing things very, very measured, right? Which is why eventually it just kind of like got out of control. But at the beginning, they were very measured. So they were trying to limit the impact that this was having, right? So trying to talk with all the inbound, because tourism is huge for Singapore, right? So they were trying to minimize the effect by like working with the hotels and like trying to like, you know, put measures in place to minimize the risks until obviously it got to the point where it was no longer a possibility, right?
Okay, so Yen, you were working with the tourism ministries of 6 different countries in the Mekong region. Give me some of their insights. What were they seeing, and did they realize what a challenging situation, what a devastating situation this was going to be for the region?
Well, I think when it started in January, it was all focused on China, you know, and obviously had an effect on a lot of the countries, you know, that depend on China outbound tourists. So people weren't so much concerned about actually infections in the country at that time, or even considering lockdowns and things what we're seeing right now, but more about, you know, how it affects the dry up of Chinese outbound tourism. So that was, I think, the first thing. And you know, people were starting to wear masks and so on, but there was nothing really in terms of policies to restrict travel. Even though there, you know, we've seen some voices hearing that might be good, but I think that's where also, you know, working with ministries and having done that for a while, it all takes a little bit longer, you know, to really put policies in place. As Mar said, I think Singapore probably was one of the first in Southeast Asia, and obviously the spike that happened in Korea, I think kind of woke people a little bit up, because that was something that I think a lot of people didn't expect that it could go outside of China. So now basically what we're seeing now is obviously that Thailand has some stringent policies in place, as we heard from Birdie, that Myanmar now came on board too. We've seen actually Vietnam being quite progressive, you know, early on to kind of communicate to the industry. So I think it varied a little bit, where some countries were a little bit more vocal and proactive than others. What we have done, you know, with the Mekong Tourism Coordinating Office is trying to communicate, you know. So, I mean, obviously I speak to a lot of travel companies, from the big ones, if it's hotel companies, you know, from Accor to minor, you know, tour companies, EXO and Kiri and other ones. But then also small companies, you know, there are small little hotel companies in Cambodia and activity companies. And they do really feel it, you know, from the big ones that obviously are very scared, you know, what are they doing with their thousands of employees on one hand, but then on the other hand, you know, I was just on the phone with a small hotel company out of Cambodia, as I said, and he's trying to survive and not getting kicked out of his, you know, properties from the landlord, you know. And also what we're seeing there is that there are, you know, even foreign investors, you know, some from China waiting to get good deals, you know. So it's a very difficult situation now for many of these companies. Now, when it comes to the Mekong region, I think many of you that have traveled in the region or live here know that one thing that makes the region unique are these authentically local experiences, and they are operated and provided by these small businesses. We've created a platform called the Experience Mekong Collection, where we curated 300 plus of them. And many of them are now struggling and even you know, potentially will not survive. So that's obviously sad. But on the other hand, also we feel that, you know, a major part of what makes the Mekong region unique and authentic and a reason for people to travel might go away. And so that's obviously very sad, you know, not only because, you know, the livelihood of these businesses, it creates sustainability, social impact, and inclusive growth / poverty alleviation, but also a reason why people actually travel in the region, you know, to experience these travel businesses. You know, if it's the small little restaurant or the eco lodge or the tour and activity. So I think that's a worrisome thing that we're seeing. And obviously there's not much we can do at this point. But what we are doing is, you know, as I mentioned before, we do communicate. So besides my calls with small and large companies, we do weekly calls with the governments to really get input and updates, which we then put on our, you know, coronavirus update page. We also have then a bi-weekly update emails to the governments to also inform them what we're hearing from the private sector and out there, so they're also informed, and we can help them from that standpoint. I mentioned our update page, and I put a link in the chat for anyone who is interested in checking that out. We continue our monthly Mekong tourism newsletter, where we inform the industry at large. But then we created a Mekong tourism advisory group. Now, this wasn't designed for the pandemic or the crisis situation, but it obviously creates more relevance and purpose now. Some of you, I mean, Bertie and Rick and some on the call are part of the Mekong Tourism Advisory Group. We have 50 plus people now, and keeping it very diverse, from media to government to development organization, accommodation, tour companies, academics, and so on. So this has been actually quite interesting, because we created an online community which gotten some good engagement, where we're looking to get information and sentiments of how the industry is feeling. And then also we're joining other communities. So there's one by Travel Daily Media that has a WhatsApp group where we're part of, which is mostly hotels and tour companies. And also we're part of the PATA virtual roundtable. So I think in the end right now is we're you know, what people call social distancing. I call it physical distancing. But I think what we don't want to do is actually social distance ourselves. We want to connect, we want to communicate, we want to be as part of as many conversations as possible. So that's why communication is one of our major priorities right now, as what I call a pre-recovery strategy.
Okay, great. Thank you, Jens. Just a reminder to everybody in the audience, if you do want to ask a question, we'll be getting to those. Put any of your questions in the chat room, and we'll be asking our panelists a little bit later about that. So my question now to my panelists, is there a silver lining? Is there anything good that can come out of this? In other words, one thing that we usually don't have is time. Now, many of us do have a fair amount of time. So is this the time to be investing? Is it creating new content, investing in new technology? Is it rolling out new products? Is there anything good that can come from this? Bertie, let's start off with you. You're the managing director of Sampan Travel in Yangon.
Yeah, something I keep saying to myself is the phrase, don't waste a good crisis, by which I mean, you know, not being callous about the seriousness of the pandemic, but about, from a business sense, when something like this happens, there often are opportunities to develop things that otherwise you wouldn't have time to do. This is usually our low season, so it's usually the time when we're doing housekeeping and developing products and that kind of thing anyway. This is sort of a very extreme version of that, when we have at least 3 months, possibly more, of downtime, when we don't have inquiries coming in, we don't have guests on the ground, where we can focus on those things we've been putting off for years or months. So yeah, for sure, for Sampan, we recently migrated to a new platform for our website, and as Mar was saying, sort of, you know, investing time in evergreen content and uploading better photographs, making sure that technically the website is functioning as it should. That stuff that is so vital to any business, but often just gets kicked into the long grass. So we're spending a lot of time working on that. We were scheduled to have our Travel Life certification audit happening this month or next month. So every 2 years, Travel Life come over from Europe, and they basically assess if we're doing all the things that we say we're doing in terms of office management and looking at our supply chain and all those things. So making sure that when that happens, that we have all our records in place to show them, and also training for the team. It's also a big part of Travel Life's evaluation is how well your team understand the concepts and principles of sustainable tourism. So again, that's something they usually never have time to really dedicate to. Now they do have time to dive into those online resources and make sure their knowledge is up to scratch. And then, you know, bigger projects. So, you know, Sampan is still quite a small company. We want to be bigger. We want to get more exposure. So we'd love to sort of apply for, you know, some international travel awards, which again take a lot of time and effort to get the applications in place and put something impressive together. So these are the things that my team are focusing on now. And you know, none of us know how long this crisis will last, but you know, one of the worst case scenarios is that it's suddenly, you know, when it ends, so you haven't actually used that time to develop your company and so you can actually come out stronger in some way. So even when momentum is down and you know, the team are all working from home, trying to keep those goals in mind and set deadlines so that you do make the most of this time while you have it.
Okay, great. Thank you for sharing that with us, Bertie. Mar, you shared with us how you did an immediate pivot in mid-January, late January, when you started seeing traffic go down and information about COVID. You updated a lot of your top posts with COVID information. You don't know if it necessarily worked or not. Now that that experiment is over, what are you doing now? Are you investing your time in new content? Are you building links? Are you diversifying? What is a content creator to do during this time period?
I am busier than ever. I've never been so busy in my life. I think that, first of all, like as Bertie and everybody says, right? Like you cannot let a good crisis go to waste. So I thought I've always been like that. So I'm always very positive, very forward thinking. So from like within a week of the things started to unravel, even when it was just in Asia, I thought, okay, like, you know, I have to do something. So what can I do? And admittedly, it took me like maybe 3-4 weeks until I realized that, okay, this is not a short-term thing. This is going to go on for a while, and I cannot take tactical short-term measures. I need to take a much more longer-term approach. Maybe this is the time to rethink some things that I didn't think in the past. So, you know, unfortunately, when you're a publication, your work is not determined by how much traffic you have. Whether I have 500,000 like I had before the crisis or before the virus started, or whether I have 50,000, the work is exactly the same, right? So unfortunately, the same way your revenues scale, even if you work less, your revenues also, your work doesn't go down if your revenues go down. So unfortunately, I am equally as busy on the blog. But at the same time, I'm also not traveling. So I usually travel 40-45% of the year. And that I've been doing that for the last 6-7 years, you know, always 150 days of the year I'm traveling. So these are times now that I am here. So I am very productive. I am very productive with my team and with other partners that I work with on various initiatives. So it's 40% more time than I have. On top of that, I don't have commitments from trips that I might have taken that I would have had to produce content for. So I have more time. However, for my main business, the amount of dedication is the same. So what I've done is I've done 3 things. For my main business, which is the blog, travel blog, I continue to update the posts and I continue to keep them optimized. I am not changing or optimizing certain parts because I don't know what's going to happen. For example, do I remove certain links for certain tour companies or for certain affiliates that have disconnected their affiliate programs? No, I'm not, because I'm waiting to see what will happen. It's a big effort to replace links. So I will wait until the crisis ends and to see what the end state is and what companies have survived, what companies have not survived. So there are parts that I'm not updating, but I continue to keep the content fresh. I've also taken this opportunity to create videos for every one of my top 100 articles. So as you can imagine, this is 100 videos. So it's a lot of videos, which my team has been doing nonstop for the last 2 weeks. So we've been creating videos, which was something that I had on the long list of to-do things for a very long time. So for the main blog is keeping the content updated and creating these videos and doing certain content that I think is still evergreen. So I continue to publish. Somebody was asking in the comments, do you continue to pitch? Do you continue to publish? I continue to publish articles that I believe for me are a pillar of, an authoritative pillar that I want to focus on. So I will continue to publish content on Singapore, on Korea, on Barcelona, on certain destinations that are my top destinations. I think that in any case, if you play the SEO game, this is a long-term game. So publishing, why should I publish in 6 months? I will continue to publish. I've also started to create a list of content that's more like generic and evergreen, which would be read now and would be read forever. So I've designed a list of content pieces that will be around those things. And then I have 2 other work streams. One is I started a second site that is more food related, and therefore is not, it's my anti-cyclical measure, right? Trying to diversify my business. I thought my business was diversified, but clearly not diversified enough to withstand something that is like so widely spread and affecting everything. So I've started the second site that's related to food, and that's evergreen. People are at home, they're cooking like maniacs. Me, myself, I'm cooking all the time, more than ever before. So apparently, in Singapore, when we started the lockdown, there are certain things that sold out: printers, chairs, tables, gym equipment, and bread and yeast and flour, apparently. Bread machines, yeast and flour. So everybody's making bread, it seems. So there are certain things that I've realized are segments that are anti-cyclical. So I started a second site to do with that. And then there's a third a stream that started just before before these situations came about, which is mid-January, I took over a Facebook group that has almost 60,000 solo female travelers. This is something that I'm managing with another partner, and this group is growing by 5,000 to 10,000 members every month. So it's growing. Even now that nobody is traveling, is still growing at a very high pace, and it would probably be growing faster if people were still traveling. And so because I'm not traveling, and neither is my business partner in this endeavor, we have the time to set up the website and to start to create all the content and all the foundation for this group. So we're talking to partners that we might be working with, like, for example, G Adventures that we might partner with, or a variety of partners that we might work with. So we are setting the foundation, and we're probably doing it faster than we would have if we were both traveling. So it's an opportunity to do something that, we maybe can do in 3 months rather than 12, which is what might have taken if we were on the road and focused on other things. So I am busier than ever.
Okay, great overview. Jens, how are the governments of the Mekong area investing for the future? And I'm going to start off with this question specifically. Thailand was ground zero at some level. Approximately 25% of the inbound tourists are coming from China. So that was quite a shock to the system back in January and February, when the threat of a reduction of 25% of tourists were not going to be coming to Thailand anymore. Obviously, that is spread to the entire world. But what I'm getting at is the Mekong area, the government's looking to diversify their reliance upon China when they come out of this?
Thank you, Rick. A good question, which I'm not sure if I can answer that. I think the governments are still trying to figure that out. I know they're, talking to TAT. I think they're the Tourism Authority of Thailand. I know there are quite a few discussions around recovery and so on, and talking to the governments. But I think what I can say is, and what we are promoting is that now sustainable tourism probably is more important than ever. So I mean, really having a holistic destination management system involved with all stakeholders, and also protecting the SMEs and the small, medium enterprises. So, I mean, when it comes to a recovery strategy, it's quite interesting because everyone talks about it, but I think in the end, it's really not rocket science, So, I mean, yes, now you have time to step back. You can look at your systems, you can look at your source markets, you can diversify, you can look at service improvements when it comes to the hotel level, maybe even improvements of facilities and physical attributes. But I think what we have done, over the past 5 years is really create a system and put initiatives and programs in place that, even though they weren't designed for resilience, but they really will accelerate tourism recovery in the long term. So what I mean by that is, I think now what's important is really having relationships with industry stakeholders. Everyone is doing that. When I talk to the tour companies, hotel companies, everyone is looking to kind of keep these relationships, talk to their B2B partners and their consumers. But when it comes to the small businesses, I think especially in this region, it's a little bit more challenging. And what we have created, over the last 2 years, this Experience Mekong collection, I think will become a very powerful platform to help these 300 plus small businesses, because it is in essence a consortia. We are in contact with them. We're looking to do a survey to kind of find out, you know, how big the impact is, what they need, how we can help, and also create campaigns with them in the future. You know, so this platform, I think, again, even though it wasn't designed as a recovery strategy, but will be very important for the recovery, not just, as I mentioned before, for these small businesses, but also for the essence of what the Mekong region stands for as relates to authentically local experiences and driving inclusive growth, sustainability, and the poverty alleviation. We are working on a powerful, you know, or a social media recovery campaign. I can't share too much right now, but we're talking to various stakeholders where we're looking to leverage our Mekong Moments platform. So again, you know, this has been put in place for the last 3 years, and now will become very handy when it comes to tourism recovery, you know, in a few months' time. We also, this week, we're looking to launch a new program, which is called Mekong Heroes. And Mekong Heroes is really recognizing people that have been very instrumental in shaping sustainable tourism in the region. We'll put that out later on this week. You can already go on mekongtourism.org and you can nominate people. I've got various feedback from quite a few people, including Peter Richards, who's on the call, and other ones, to help me shape this program. And I think it will be something very positive in this period where we hear a lot of gloom and doom. Another thing is valuing innovation and startups. You know, so as many of you know, we have for the last 3 years now our Mekong Innovative Startups and Tourism Program, MIST, which was you know, co-launched with by the Asian Development Bank and with support from the Australian government. So again, a very important platform now that comes to play when we look at recovery. We will be, in the first week of May, we will be launching on our nominations page, where people can nominate startups in 2 categories, social enterprises and travel technology. And we are also talking if we should do something that actually has been done in Estonia, where in Estonia, people, there was kind of like a hackathon where they were looking for solutions for COVID-19 recovery. So we're also talking if this is something we should do. We're not sure if it's going to be a physical event this year. It might be online pitching. But again, this structure of these initiatives and programs that we have developed over the last 5 years, I think are now basically shaping our recovery strategy. And this is nothing that you can just build and duplicate in 1 or 2 or 3 months. This has been done for the last 5 years, as I said, and I think will be now very powerful for the region and especially for these smaller enterprises.
Okay, great. Thank you, Jens. At this time, I'd like our producer, Maria, to join us. Maria, are there any questions from the audience that we can direct to our 3 panelists?
Hey, Rick. Yes, we do have a few questions in the chat box. Also, if you click the chat button on the bottom of your Zoom screen, you will also see them. If you want me to do it, I can also read.
Yeah, why don't you pick 1 or 2 since you probably have seen them during the presentation?
Yes. So Ian is asking, Mar, how do you know Google was punishing sites mentioned COVID, and is this still happening?
It was mentioned by the advertising network that I am with. They started to say, I can't remember when exactly, I would say end of Feb maybe, they started to mention that we should avoid using words like pandemic, virus, corona, etc. Also on my Facebook group, the Solo Female Travelers group, Facebook at the same time, all of a sudden, it was also on the news, started to automatically remove posts that maybe had been there for a week or 2 even, that mentioned the virus in any way, to kind of like try to, it was one of their measures, one of their algorithms that was removing posts that had to do with the virus to kind of stop the spread of fake news or like unvetted information and advice. And so I also woke up one day to our main resource post with all the coronavirus updates from all the countries and all the news removed from the feed, and it took them 2 days to reinstate it. This also was at the same time when both Google and Facebook and other companies started to feel the effects of lockdowns and restrictions of travel across the world, because a lot of the people that are doing the manual checking, and this I also know from the time when I was working at Google, right? The manual checks of advertising approvals, the 99% of the ads are approved automatically by algorithm, the same with the posts, right? But there are also a percentage of them that are being manually approved. And when all of these employees were not able to go to work anymore, they were not able to do that. So they had to, all online companies had to up their focus on algorithms. And so this is why a lot of posts were suddenly removed. And, you know, it was on quite a lot of the news on the Facebook situation as well. And I think it was Mediavine maybe a couple of weeks ago or a week ago that, or maybe I read it on the news somewhere, that Google had admitted that, okay, Corona and the virus and Covid-19 and pandemic and all of these words were words that had become part of the regular vocabulary. It had become part of day-to-day conversation. And so they were no longer going to negatively, let's say downrank articles that would talk about this topic.
Thank you, Mar. There is another question to all of the panelists, whoever can answer. Are there tourists stranded in Southeast Asia that are still trying to get back home, and what are governments doing?
In Singapore, I don't think so, because I haven't heard any news, and the government have been very upfront all the beginning, and I don't think they've cut 100% of the flights. So I don't think there are tourists stranded here. Also, Singapore closed the borders a month ago already to tourists. So I would say that probably whatever tourists were here already had time to leave. People don't come to Singapore for a very long time anyway, right? So it would be, strange that you would be stuck here, because usually people come for 3-4 days, right? So you would probably have enough notice to leave and just carry on with your travels.
I'm not aware of any tourists stuck in Myanmar. About a week after the UK government basically recommended every British national to leave Myanmar, I got an email from a former guest of mine saying that two daughters of a friend of his from the UK were still traveling in Myanmar, and whether I could help them get out. So I rang them, they're in Bagan, and it was quite late in the evening, but I said, look, you want to get back to Yangon as soon as possible, try and get you on a flight, because I don't know what's going to happen in the next few days. And I thought maybe I'd come on a bit too strong, but it turns out probably the opposite, actually, because they then spoke to their mom, who then emailed me, say, oh, Bertie, actually, they think everyone's overreacting, and they really want to see Napoli Beach, so they're going to stick it out for a little bit. Eventually, I just said, well, look, no, they should go to Yangon now, because at this point, even expats were pulling their hair out trying to get out, because flights were just being cancelled every day. And eventually, these girls realized how serious it was. They got back to Yangon, and they got on a flight out, which 3 times the price of what it would have been usually. So my understanding is all tourists have left now, and certainly they can't really leave now, because commercial flights are no longer coming in and out. But it was chaos those last couple of weeks, even with, like I say, expatriates living here trying to get out. It was messy. Yeah.
And in Thailand, there's definitely a lot of tourists still here. I just read an article, roughly 8,000 Russians are stuck, for example, in Phuket. Russian government has started some flights to repatriate those people back to Russia. I'm going to take one question here I see from Philip Meyer. He is a travel writer, and he's asking, obviously, no one's looking for new content right now on travel destinations these days, but he is saying, since editors are looking out 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 months out, is it reasonable to be pitching editors on travel destinations at this time? Any thoughts on that?
I think that most publications that are not necessarily looking for long-term content, but might be looking for more seasonal stuff, my feeling from groups that I am in, and probably Philip feels the same, is that it's very much a wait and see situation. They don't really know what's going to happen. They don't really know how long this is going to be. So what I see is that most publications are veering more towards things that are even more related to armchair travel and traveling from home and virtual tours and things like that, rather than I contributed to an article on Forbes, for example, that was titled, travel professionals tell us where they're going to go when this all ends. So maybe this is sort of angle that publications are most interested in publishing at the moment. I would think along those lines, rather than try to pitch a story that might be, for a trip in December, or a destination that's big in December, or a festival that's in December, because maybe they are not interested in that. And it's also my feeling as well, is that people are not in the right mindset. Also from what I see in the group with 60,000 women solo travelers, right? People are not really thinking about traveling anymore. While a lot of people were still planning up until maybe 3 weeks ago, now people are not. It is kind of like we park this here, we put travel in this little pigeonhole here, and we wait and see. And then when things remove, we can come back. Some people are still planning. There is some talk about people planning trips for maybe next year or things like that. But for the majority of the people, it's more about, let's park this here for a while. Let's think about other things, and then we will get back to it later. So maybe that's the sort of content that publications are also not seeing an interest for. But things like armchair travel, virtual tours, things to work from home, how to travel from home, cuisines, cooking recipes, drinks from around the world, this sort of stuff is the type of content that I would think editors are still interested in, and the ones that I still see published, and the ones that I see in like Help a Reporter and these sort of resources where, quotes are being looked for.
Okay, and I think we're going to take one last question. That's going to be from Byron Hartzler. Do we see any new technologies or innovations in the tourism industry? Maybe is there going to be, apps required of all tourists so the government can track them in case there's another health or pandemic scare? But we'll use this as a lightning round. Any big innovations or technologies that you guys are seeing that are going to get rolled out after this terrible and difficult time?
I have a very quick one. It's not a very big thing, but it's something that might give a bit of lighting to, some people have been smarter and quicker to move online. And there are some businesses that you can't really move online, right? You cannot really do a trip online. But I've seen guides doing virtual tours of their places, or in the places where there is no lockdown. So literally, like as a guide, taking your phone and doing a live session of around your country. Like I could do this in Singapore up until a week ago, for example, or in Italy, that lady that became so famous that she used to have an Airbnb experience of cooking pasta at home, that now is doing those sessions live. So you still pay 50 euros and you still get the thing. You bring the ingredients yourself, and she does it live, and she takes questions and whatever. She's broadcasting from her kitchen. So those are like new opportunities that, maybe she continues to do that after all these ends, right? Maybe she combines the two. It's more scalable. Things that we might have in the past thought that could not be done online and you really had to be there and were not scalable. Now people are, out of necessity and creativity, bringing them online. And I think that's a nice thing.
I'll put Jens on the spot. Do you have one, your soothsayer, look at your crystal ball? Are you seeing one new innovation or technology coming out of this?
Well, I mean, I would agree with Ma. I think there's obviously various apps that could come out of that, tracking people and helping with more operational functions. But I think in the end, what really will drive a good recovery is community and collaboration, and really making sure that we can engage all stakeholders in the process. And so that's obviously a lot more challenging, but there are platforms there that can allow to do that, especially when it comes to the destination side. So I think I definitely believe that innovation will come out of this. I mean, if you look at some of the reports from futurists, many of the big companies today were actually created in crisis situations. So I think we will, on one hand, see a shakeup of established companies, and new companies will come out. So we'll have to see what actually happens. But I do believe that innovation will come out of this for sure.
Okay, thank you, Jens. I lied. We got a couple more questions in. I don't want to leave anybody out. We got 2 questions to Bertie. We'll make this a lightning round, so if you can answer them briefly. From John Farrell, Bertie. A lot of 5-star hotels and resorts are closed in Myanmar. It's probably going to be a slow process to opening up the country to international long-haul flights. In the meantime, as tourism comes back slowly, which of these hotels and resorts do in Myanmar?
Well, no obvious response to that. I think certainly just from my perspective, I'm not counting on long-haul flights coming back for a while. So I'll be focusing on products that are attractive to expats living here, like we did before, who will come back before them, and potentially even Myanmar domestic travelers as well. They will keep traveling when they can again, and that'll certainly happen before the long-haul flights return. So I would focus on offers or products that are attractive to people living in Myanmar, not just coming from abroad.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's safe to see at some level, since China was the first country to get COVID, the first country in essence to come out of it. And as I think we've seen the reports, we've seen domestic tourism grow in China. So that might be a plan for every country around the world to initially focus on domestic clients first, as hopefully international flights increase and build up. And truly our last question for the evening, Birdie, this is coming from Peter Richards. Which online training subjects do you think would be the most helpful for tourism SMEs to survive COVID in the immediate term to the next couple of months?
I think if Peter's asking what subjects will help them actually know how to survive the next couple of months, I'm not quite sure how to answer that one. All I would say is that if they're a Myanmar company, they probably had experience going through this kind of turbulence before, because it's Myanmar, and with Rakhine and everything else, they have more experience than others in managing these kind of crises. Apart from that, I'm afraid I'm just going on my own past experience and kind of learning as I go. So there's no modules that I can recommend off the shelf, I'm afraid.
Okay. Well, a giant thank you to everybody this evening and everybody who checked in from around the world. I want to thank my three panelists, Mars, Jens, and Birdie. I really appreciate your insights. I want to thank the audience for sticking with us this evening. I want to thank our producer, Maria. Remember, if you go to travelmassive.com, you should join Travel Massive Live. That will show and showcase all of the upcoming content that will be coming down the pipeline. For Southeast Asia, we have another regional presentation on April 23rd, and that will be representatives from Vietnam, Bangkok, as well as Bali. So giant thank you again for everybody who checked in with us, and we hope to see you soon. Thank you.